Alrighty, hi everyone. Let's talk about configuring Jamf Account single sign-on feature to connect to Jamf Pro. I'm William Smith, I go by Bill, and you can find me on most social media or our Jamf community as Talking Moose. So back in January, we introduced a new feature to authenticate Jamf Pro administrators through Jamf Account. It's fair to say we've had customers react to this in a few different ways. There's been confusion, there's been apprehension, there's been misunderstanding, and questions about why we're doing this. So my goal today is to try to show you the big picture. Why is Jamf requiring single sign-on through Jamf Account? And to help you implement this in your environments. So first, let's talk about what this feature does. This is my Jamf Pro instance in Jamf Cloud, and when configured for single sign-on through Jamf Account, I can sign into my instance with the same username I'd use for Jamf Account. And as part of that sign-in, I have access to features provided by services Jamf has only made available in Jamf Cloud, like the AI Assistant, Jamf's AI chat service that supports administrators with their device management and security, or Blueprints, which we released around Jamf Pro 11.17 in June. This is Jamf's implementation of declarative device management for managing the state of your computers and mobile devices. So similar to configuration profiles, but it does more. And compliance benchmarks, introduced around Jamf Pro 11.16 back in May for enforcing security compliance standards across all of your managed computers. Now, I'm going to talk more about these in just a little bit and why we required single sign-on to access these new features. All right, using the app switcher in the upper left-hand corner, which we introduced in Jamf Pro 11.17 in June, around the same time as Blueprints, I can switch to another cloud product. Oh, looks like it went too far ahead. All right, so I'm logged into Jamf Pro. And then using the app feature in the upper left-hand corner, which we did introduce in Jamf Pro 11.17 in June, around the same time as Blueprints, I can use that app switcher to go to another cloud product like Jamf Protect. So switching should be seamless. There's no need to re-enter a username or a password. I found that I can get that experience using Apple Safari, Google Chrome, any kind of Chromium-based browser, or even Mozilla Firefox. And if you're not getting that experience, verify whether you've installed something like an ad blocker or some kind of privacy extension. Depending on which extensions that you're using, you may need to exclude jamfcloud.com to allow switching to work properly. You should still be able to continue blocking third-party cookies, which are those cookies that are used by many of the websites to actually kind of customize ad tracking and things like that, though. All right. But there is a bigger picture to this. We didn't create single sign-on to Jamf Cloud products as our end goal. It wasn't really necessarily a highly requested feature request by our customers. So our reasons for implementing single sign-on are tied to long-term development plans that we need to meet. All of our management and our security products today are cloud-based. We develop our management products like Jamf School and Jamf Now only in Jamf Cloud. Our security products like Jamf Protect, Jamf Safe Internet, and Jamf Security Cloud are based in Jamf Cloud. The one exception to all of these products is Jamf Pro. Now, yes, we do offer it in Jamf Cloud, but we also do make a on-premises version for this that's standalone that you can install. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. And starting a couple of years ago, we began evaluating how much of our products have the same functionality. There's a lot of overlap, which means we're duplicating development effort. And that means time and money that we could be spending in other places, developing other features, or maybe fixing product issues. So we started architecting our cloud infrastructure to support new features that could be shared across multiple products. Again, AI Assistant, blueprints, or compliance benchmarks. These are the 3 that we've released this year. Now, to you, our customers, these are features. But to us, these are cloud services that each exist to do one very specific thing each. They don't even live in the products themselves. They live outside the products. One of the ways that you're going to benefit from all of this development like this is that you won't need to wait for a cloud upgrade to Jamf Pro in order to be able to take advantage of updates to these features. Blueprints, for example, they're releasing like every 2 weeks. So the Blueprint Services monitors Apple's published documentation for declarative profiles and configuration profiles, and as soon as it detects a change, so for example, when Apple updates a management key for macOS, the service reads the update and it publishes a change to Blueprints. And then the next time that you visit Blueprints in Jamf Pro or Jamf School, you'll see that update. It's immediately available. So imagine what it would be like if every feature were kind of like that way. Jamf wouldn't need to shut down your servers every month to apply updates. But we can only do this effectively if we're building these in Jamf Cloud alongside the products. So there'll be more shared features like these coming in the future. And right now, each of our management and security products has its own database of usernames and passwords. For the average customer, that's at least 2 to 3 different user accounts per administrator. And we all know what a lost or forgotten password means. Either the administrator needs to click an I forgot link, they'll need to contact a coworker to have that coworker reset their password, or they're going to have to reach out to us at Jamf Support. Now, the ideal way to handle multiple cloud services is to implement something called an identity provider like Google or Microsoft or Okta. And an identity provider can act like a directory services server in the cloud, much like Active Directory on premises. It's a single place to manage user accounts. But still, not all of our customers have an identity provider, and not all of our customers want one. So Jamf is working to consolidate users into Jamf Account as the primary method for authenticating to all of our Jamf Cloud services, kind of a one ring to bind them all. So if you're a customer who chooses to use an identity provider, it means that you'll only need to create one connection to your Jamf account, not multiple connections to each of your Jamf products. So why are we requiring single sign-on through Jamf Account to access those new features like AI Assistant and blueprints and compliance benchmarks? To understand this, I'm going to talk about something called a graph. That's a cloud architecture term. A graph is simply a bunch of cloud services that are designed to work together. And each service is called a node. And each node has its own security settings controlling who's allowed to use it and what they're allowed to do with that node. So think of this like the privileges that you're probably familiar with right now in Jamf Pro to control which administrator can access different features within Jamf Pro. So to securely tie all of these products together, not at the product level, but at the user level, we're using Jamf Account. And this architecture is going to let us do something new. Now, we're looking at Jamf Cloud as a bunch of unrelated products. We're looking at Jamf as a platform. Eventually, it shouldn't matter what product you use, you're going to end up using Jamf. And what'll let us and you tie all of these services together will be a graph API. That's like the Jamf Pro API that lets you programmatically access Jamf Pro itself. Except this isn't going to be specific to a product, it's going to be specific to your Jamf management, your tenant managing Jamf account. So we've actually started implementing this, and we've also called it the Jamf Platform API. It's in private beta today. All right. That's what the back-end architecture looks like today, and I hope that kind of gives you an idea of where we're headed, but we still have a lot of work to do. We need to get our existing customers to use single sign-on through Jamf Account first, and to be clear, it doesn't require an identity provider. Jamf IDs will work just fine. And soon, we're going to begin onboarding all of our new customers through Jamf Account, where their entire experience is going to be through single sign-on to begin with. Ultimately, who can access different products and features of our cloud graph relies on identifying who logs in and who authenticates. This is where I've seen so many of our customers getting confused. We make two types of authentication through Jamf Account available, and both types of authentication are going to give you access to your products and the additional cloud services like AI Assistant, blueprints, and compliance benchmarks. Now, the first mechanism is called a Jamf ID. A Jamf ID is kind of like a local administrator account on a computer, or maybe a standard administrator account in Jamf Pro. It's backed by a database of usernames and passwords specific to Jamf Account, and it's not tied to any kind of directory service. So when I signed into my Jamf Pro server just a little bit ago using dswopes1 at fallaciousbooks.com, I was using a Jamf ID. It matches his email address. That's the same username I'd use for our Jamf community forums, or to access the Jamf training catalog, or create bookmarks and watch lists online from our Jamf Learn documentation. So let's look at what we need to do in order to be using a Jamf ID. First, I need a valid email address to create a Jamf ID. And by valid, I mean we're going to send an email to that address and we're going to ask you to respond. We require that validation to help us combat spam on our Jamf community forums and other customer tools. And requiring a valid email address isn't really any kind of different from anything else that we're already doing from any other online service. So a Jamf ID can be your company email address. It can be a free email address like Outlook.com or Gmail.com, or even a plus address where your email service respects something like dswopes1 plus Jamf at Outlook.com. As far as we're concerned, dswopes1 and dswopes1 plus Jamf are different email addresses, and they'll make different Jamf IDs, but email to any address is still delivered to that primary address, dswopes1 at Outlook.com. Now, that's a great way to create multiple Jamf IDs without needing multiple email addresses. All right, let's look at a few ways to configure single sign-on to Jamf account through, single sign-on to Jamf Pro through Jamf Account. Now, the first option that I'm going to show you requires just a Jamf ID. To use a Jamf ID, there's nothing I need to do in Jamf Account whatsoever. But I do want to show you that my administrator, Danny, does have a Jamf ID associated with his organization. So after logging into Jamf Account, I'm going to click Organization, and then Users and Contacts. And here, I see Danny is the only person with the Jamf ID in this organization. Now, while you may have someone in your organization that you want to access Jamf Pro, that doesn't mean you need to add them to your organization and Jamf account. They'll still need a Jamf ID, but you only need to add it to your Jamf account if you want them to be able to access your Jamf assets, like an activation code, or licenses, or software downloads. Now, I need to do two things, though, in Jamf Pro. I'm going to open a new tab, and I'm going to log into my standard Jamf admin, with my standard Jamf admin password that I created whenever I first set up Jamf Pro. And notice that Jamf Pro's login page shows both username and password fields right now. So first, I need to turn on single sign-on in Jamf Pro. And I want to do this under Settings, and then Single Sign-On. And I'm going to click Edit. And if I'm turning this on for the very first time, that's all I need to do. Just turn it on, that's it. I'll go ahead and save. And then I need to configure a user account under Settings, User Accounts and Groups. I'm going to create a new standard user account. All right, I can create any username I like. In this case, I'm going to use dswopes1 for Danny's username because that matches his username everywhere else. And I'm going to make Danny an administrator. But his email address has to match his Jamf ID. That's what Jamf Account will pass to Jamf Pro when logging Danny in. And then finally, I'll assign Danny's Jamf Pro user a password that meets Jamf Pro's password complexity requirements. But there's no need for that password to match Jamf Account's password. And even in a future release of Jamf Pro, we're going to make it even easier. If you use a Jamf ID, you won't even have to set a password in the Jamf Pro account. So with single sign-on, Jamf Pro is going to look first to Jamf Account's password for Danny, and then only if there's no Jamf ID will Jamf Pro then fall back to using the password from Jamf Pro. I'll go ahead and save. And here's how I recommend testing single sign-on just after you've configured it. Leave your browser window open and open a new private browser window, or even a completely different browser. This way, if you've made a mistake, you can make corrections because you're still logged into that window behind. I'm going to go to the Jamf Pro login page, and I want you to notice that single sign-on is turned on. You'll know that single sign-on is turned on because now it's only prompting us for an email address. There is no password field. So after putting in Danny's email and clicking continue, I'm prompted for a password, but instead of the password that I put into Danny's Jamf Pro account, I'm entering Danny's Jamf ID password. Then I continue logging in with Danny's Jamf ID, and I come to the dashboard. And if I click that user account in the upper right corner, I see Danny is logged in. It's dswopes1. So that's perfect. Everything worked as expected. So from now on, I don't need to use that private browser anymore. I'm done testing. If you have multiple Jamf Pro instances, like a production and maybe a sandbox instance, you can add the same Jamf ID to each instance and access all of them the same way. And you'll have access to all those extra features like AI Assistant, blueprints, and compliance benchmarks. Now let's build on what we've done, and let's look at adding an identity provider. I want to make it clear though, using an identity provider is not required for single sign-on through Jamf Account. Your Jamf ID is perfectly fine for accessing those extra services. On the flip side though, if you do have an identity provider, we'd really like you to use that instead of using a Jamf ID. That way, you retain complete control of your user accounts and names. So, in fact, once you integrate Jamf Account with your identity provider, you can disable Jamf ID altogether. And you can force your administrators to actually log in always using their identity provider username and password. So many of our customers do choose to use an identity provider like Google Identity and Access Management, Microsoft Entra ID, or Okta. So an identity provider acts like a directory service for all of your organization's cloud services, not just Jamf services. It replaces the database of customers and usernames and passwords by Jamf Account with your own database. So for those of you who are familiar with binding your Macs to Active Directory, so this is a very similar type of process, except you're binding all of your cloud products to your cloud identity provider. And using an identity provider takes more configuration, but it differs it does have a few different advantages to it, which I'm going to touch on as I keep going through these slides. So an identity provider, there we go. In this case, I'm going to configure Microsoft Entra ID as my identity provider in Jamf Account. So that means instead of logging into Jamf Pro with Jamf ID, where my username and password are stored in Jamf's user database, I'm going to use Entra ID stored in Microsoft's user database to log in. So I want you to pay close attention to this. The Entra ID username looks like a Jamf ID, but they're not the same user accounts. Now, before continuing with Jamf Account with an identity provider, you first have to prove that your organization owns your domain. And that's the part that's after that @ sign in the email address. If we didn't do this, someone else could spoof your username and password and gain access to servers using their identity provider. So the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, or ICANN, is the sole organization in the world that's responsible for managing domain names. And Apple has claimed apple.com, Microsoft has claimed microsoft.com, Jamf has claimed jamf.com, and chances are you have your own domain and you own that domain. Now, specifically, someone in your organization has to access your domain name servers, DNS, and you can prove to Jamf that your organization has control of your domain by adding a DNS text record. We'll provide you a small snippet of text to add to your DNS servers, and if we look up your domain in DNS and we see that same snippet of text, we'll know you're authoritative for your domain. Only you could have put that in. So then we'll allow you to continue configuring an identity provider and make it authoritative for your users. And verifying you're authoritative for your domain, you're now ready to connect an identity provider to Jamf's account. Now, Jamf provides documentation for configuring all of the common identity providers. I'm going to demonstrate how to configure Jamf account using Microsoft Entra ID. So here I've already followed our documentation to create the app registration in Entra ID, and Jamf account is going to connect with that app, and it'll only have access to what I provide through that app. It kind of acts like a sandbox in a way. So Jamf can't access anything outside of that app. It can only access what I allow it to access through that app, like usernames and passwords, or even groups. Once my Entra ID app is ready, I'm going to need to copy some information to it and put into Jamf account, and that's what I have in that little sticky note over there to the right. So let's get started. First, I'll log into my Jamf account using my Jamf ID for Danny. Now, I'll click Organization and SSO, and I'm going to point out that I've already verified my domain, fallaciousbooks.com. It says approved, which means Jamf account has successfully read that DNS record. And by the way, you need to keep that DNS text record as long as you have Jamf account integrated with your identity provider. That's how we'll know that you are still in charge of your domain. We'll periodically check it. All right, now I'm going to click Organization SSO. No. I think my slides got out of order here. Okay. All right, I'm going to close this window. Now, let's configure a new connection to my identity provider. So this is for Entra. I'm simply just going to call it Entra ID. And I'm going to copy that information from my Entra ID app, and I'm going to paste it into these fields as I go. So the domain information, I provide Jamf Account, tells it how to get it to Microsoft, and it identifies my organization. The client ID is specific to my Jamf account in Entra. The client secret value kind of acts like a password to that app in Entra ID. And I can rotate that, by the way, anytime that I want to. So if you have an administrator who leaves your organization, you can change that without having to reset up everything. And then the directory, the directory ID identifies my fallaciousbooks.com tenant in Entra ID. All right, next I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to assign my domain to Entra ID. And finally, I'll choose which of my Jamf Pro servers in Jamf Cloud I want to use with single sign-on. My instance name is Fallacious Reading. Now I'm going to save. And we're ready to test the connection. And just like we did when testing single sign-on in Jamf Pro a while ago, I'm going to show you how I suggest testing your identity provider connection. After saving your single sign-on settings in Jamf Account, stay logged in, don't do anything else, but open a different browser window, or even a private browser window. And I want you to go to another computer, or you can even go to another computer and use a browser there. If you've made a mistake, you'll still be logged in and you can still fix problems in this window. So I'm signing in as Danny, and if I've configured everything correctly, I'm redirected to Entra ID. So this is Microsoft prompting me for my password, not Jamf Account. I'll provide Danny's password, and because his Entra ID is configured for multi-factor authentication, I'll need to enter a one-time passcode. And after I've authenticated, Microsoft is going to redirect me back to Jamf Account. And if Danny's account settings in the upper right corner, I can see that he's logged in using his Jamf ID, not his Jamf ID, but rather his identity provider. All right. And because I've already configured Jamf Pro single sign-on settings and created a standard user account in Jamf Pro, I can use the app switcher in the upper left-hand corner to take me to Jamf Pro without needing to log in again. And Danny will have access to AI Assistant, blueprints, and compliance benchmarks. All right, so far I've shown how to log Danny in using his Jamf ID and his identity provider. And remember, Danny's Jamf ID allows him to access his organization's activation codes and his licenses and software downloads in Jamf Account. Now, I want to allow another user from my identity provider to log into Jamf Pro, but I don't want them to have access to Jamf Account. So maybe they're a junior administrator or a help desk technician, and they simply don't need access to my assets in Jamf Account. So it's possible to use Jamf Account's identity provider without giving access directly to Jamf Account. So let me show you what I mean. First, let's look at whose organization has access to Jamf Account. I'm going to click Organization, Users, and Contacts, and I see the only person that has access right now to Jamf Account is just Danny. Since I'm logged in as Danny, I'm going to use the app switcher to go directly to my Jamf Pro settings. I'm going to create a new standard Jamf Pro user account for Carl, who's a junior administrator. I'm going to fill in his username. I'm going to make Carl an administrator. I'm going to provide his full name. I'm going to enter his email address from Entra ID. And I'm going to provide him a password that meets Jamf Pro's password complexity requirements, and then I'll save. All right, so let's test and see what happens now. I'm going to log out Danny, and then I'll log in using Carl's email address. And perfect, I'm redirected to Microsoft to have Carl put in his Entra ID password. I'll put in Carl's password and we'll continue signing in. And after I log in and see the dashboard, I'm going to click the account settings to verify, yes, we are indeed logged in as Carl. So I hope you see that using Jamf Account doesn't really need to be in the mix for authenticating any administrators to Jamf Pro whatsoever. Once Jamf Account's configured with an identity provider, all you really need to do is add accounts directly to Jamf Pro with an email address that matches their email address in the identity provider. But what if my Jamf Pro administrators are using accounts that don't have an email address? There's a new setting that we introduced back in August that I'd really like to talk about. And it's specifically for those organizations that like to use what I'll call administrator accounts or admin accounts. An admin account is typically a secondary account that an administrator might use for signing into important servers or services. It's not tied to their primary account, which they're going to actually use that one for accessing email or taking Zoom calls or use for chat. But instead, an administrator account is like a very limited account, and it can't do anything except access certain places. So usually, it has no email address, and that's been a problem for some of our customers, because what we've been using all this time, it's been an email address. So let's start back in my organization's identity provider, Microsoft Entra ID. And I want to look at my list of users, and I want to show you that Danny has a second account designated as administrator. So let's click into his account. And Danny's username for this administrator looks very much like the username and email address for his other account. The only difference is that it contains a -A after the first part of his username. I had an account like this whenever I was an administrator at a different company. We called these -A accounts. And my -A account didn't have an email address. I used it purely for administrator work. If I look at the properties of Danny's -A account, I see no email address associated with it. So how do I identify Danny's -A account without an email address? There's another property that I can use instead. It's called the user principal name, UPN for short. We've actually been using this property the entire time when we're logging in. A UPN is a username, and it's not uncommon for administrators to make somebody's email address look like their UPN in an account. That way, the administrators can simply say, oh, just log in with your email address. And your end users will understand what that means. So before we can log in with Danny's UPN, we first have to tell our identity provider to include that information in the information that it sends down to Jamf Account. So for Entra ID, I'll click the app registration, and I'm going to go find the app that I configured for Jamf Account. And I need to look at my token configuration. When I configured my app for Jamf Account, I had to tell it to include some properties, some information like my name, my email address, and that will send that information down to Jamf Account to help identify me. Now, I need to add another piece of information. I'll click Add Optional Claim, and I'm going to choose ID, and then I'll scroll down in that list, and I'm going to select UPN. Then I'll click Add, and that's all I need to do here. Now, I'll open up a new tab in my browser, and I'm going to log into my Jamf account. And I'm using Danny's regular email for the identity provider. Remember, accessing Jamf account does require a username and a valid email password. It won't support accounts without a verified email. So to configure Jamf account, I'll go into my organization. I'm going to click Settings. And here I need to turn on Enable Advanced Features. I'll save. And then I'm going to go to my single sign-on settings. I'm going to edit, and I'm going to scroll down until I see a new field that appears called Custom Username Claim Name. I'm going to enter UPN. That's that additional claim that I told my identity provider to send down to Jamf account whenever I'm authenticating. After adding that custom claim, I'll scroll to the bottom and I'll save my settings. Now, I'm going to use the app switcher to take me over to Jamf Pro and directly into Settings. I'm automatically authenticated. And here, I'm going to click my single sign-on settings and I'm going to click Next. I'm going to scroll down to something we added in Jamf Pro 11.20 at the beginning of September. I'm switching the identity provider user mapping from email to username. My identity provider is configured in Jamf account. This is telling Jamf Pro to look for a username coming through Jamf account instead of looking for the email address. I'll also set the Jamf Pro user mapping to username. So this is telling Jamf Pro to match the username coming through Jamf account to the username field in my Jamf Pro account. So let's go create a new account for Danny's -A account. I'm going to save, and I'm going to click Settings and User Accounts. And I'm going to create another new standard account. And in the username field here, I'm going to enter the user principal name from my identity provider. Now be very careful here. Once you make these changes, you also need to update everybody else's username fields, or they may not be able to log into Jamf Pro. So the Jamf Pro user mapping setting that I just toggled from email to username is telling Jamf Pro to match what's in the username field now, not the email address field. I'll fill out the rest of Danny's account information, but note, I'm leaving his email address field blank. This account has no email address associated with it. All right, I'll save and log out Danny, his regular account. Now let's try to log in with Danny's administrator account. Remember, this is his administrator-A account. When I click Continue, I'm redirected to Microsoft, the identity provider. I'll put in the password for Danny's -A administrator account. And if I look under Account Settings in the upper right, I see that I am definitely indeed logged in as that -A account. And just to reiterate, while Danny's -A user may be a full administrator in Jamf Pro, it still has no access to any of the assets in Jamf account because this username is not associated with my organization whatsoever in Jamf account. All right. I hope that gives you some insight into not only how, but why we've implemented single sign-on in Jamf Pro through Jamf account. You're seeing the beginning of a transition to how we need to evolve to meet future needs. So let's recap on what I just covered here. In order to develop faster and smarter, we need to move to developing Jamf as a single platform made up of small, manageable services. and features. And these features are powered by these services that live outside of the products themselves. We need to be able to tie all of these services together, which we can only do effectively in Jamf Cloud. For security's sake, to manage access to all of these services, we need to identify users to determine the features that they're allowed to access. Our single sign-on development in Jamf Account and the entire Jamf platform is still very much underway and not finished yet. But for most of our customers, it's ready to use today. We simply need you to transition to it. And I hope I've shown you a very easy way to configure something that meets your needs. Our Jamf customer success and support groups are here to help you do that. Check out the Jamf booth in the expo hall, ask whatever questions you need to ask, and voice your concerns too. We're listening. And yes, this is Jamf Cloud only. And yes, only Jamf Cloud's customers have access to important new features like AI Assistant and blueprints and compliance benchmarks. For those of you who are still running your own Jamf Pro on premises, we need to convince you to move to Jamf Cloud. We understand that many of you have blockers, and we are working to help resolve those blockers. So I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. We've only got a few minutes left. Thank you. And we have somebody who's going to run a microphone around.
With this setup, will we still have like the failover option available in case, the IDP is down or something, right? And you need to get into Jamf Pro?
Definitely. So the question was, is the failover URL still going to be available? Definitely. I only didn't cover it because I didn't have time to actually go into that. But if you're familiar with configuring single sign-on, and for some reason single sign-on does not work, through the Jamf Pro API, you can still access that Jamf Pro failover URL, and you can still gain access to your servers if for some reason something breaks. But definitely.
With the password option then going away, just for our side, we probably have to just make sure we have a break glass account then in there, right, with the password set? Okay.
It shouldn't affect anybody who's already set today. It's really just going to be kind of a future enhancement. I have a feeling it's going to be side by side. You can have a password or you can possibly not have a password. I don't think it's going to be all or nothing, but I don't know about that for sure. Got somebody over here.
Yeah, I mainly work as an external consultant for other companies, and I might just have a Jamf Pro admin account and no IDP account in their tenant. Can I turn on IDP for the customer and still log in with my Jamf ID?
Yes.
Okay.
Nothing stops Jamf Pro from recognizing either a Jamf ID or an identity provider. In fact, you can turn off Jamf ID if you want to force people to use an identity provider, but they are not mutually exclusive.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yes, we currently have SSO set up in our Jamf Pro instance through SAML, but we have a kind of a funky IDP. But if we've got it set up already in Jamf Pro, will there be any roadblocks to setting it up for Jamf account?
As long as it supports OIDC2 and OAuth, you should be fine. We can't help you with every identity provider, but I think we've got instructions for most of the big ones, all of the big ones, like Ping Federate and obviously Entra and Google and Microsoft. So we should be able to help you with the big ones. If you can support your protocols, the protocols we require, then it should be possible.
So you've got a nice setting in there I noticed was added that it's direct IDP login URL so that we can skip the Jamf account email entering part. and so that works great. But I've noticed when you hit log out or it times out, it goes back to the Jamf ID. Is there any plan or any way to get it to time out or log out back to the IDP login screen?
I think part of that is due to Jamf Pro itself logging you out, timing you out. And unfortunately, today I know the problem you're talking about, but I don't have a solution for you. I wish I did. Unfortunately, it does mean you will have to put your username in again, but you should not have to put your password in again. So I wish I had a better answer for you on that.
2 questions. For once you configure SSO in your Jamf account, is there like a failover login for that, like an administrator account that can still log in and configure that SSO?
Ah, good question. I don't know of one. I think I've got somebody here who might be able to answer from the Jamf account team. Quinn, are you here? Yeah, right. Oh. Okay, I'm going to have you talk to this person right here after the session, all right?
And just one more question, too. So we use group claims today with Jamf Pro and SSO integrated directly, where we don't create usernames directly in Jamf Pro. So as long as they're a member of a group, they can just sign right in.
All right.
Is that some workflow that we can use, or is there plans to integrate SCIM or just-in-time provisioning of accounts?
Yes, you can use groups. And again, just for the sake of time, I didn't cover groups, but you can definitely add a group from your identity provider directly into Jamf Pro, and that will honor and respect that flow through Jamf account.
Thank you.
So groups work.
For the domain claim process, if my domain on my EPN does not match the domain on my email, which domain do I claim?
You can only use the domain that you own, that you can verify. So are you saying you own both of those or just one?
Yeah, both.
Okay, pick one. That's the easiest one, the one that makes the most sense, and try it out. You can have multiple domains associated with your Jamf account. Thank you for nodding. I got that right. So if you do want to verify both of them and add both of them to your Jamf account, that will work.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So we already have our Jamf Pro server integrated with Entra ID for our SSO. Are there any special considerations if we already have that set up to migrate to Jamf SSO?
Actually not. You do need to turn something on over in Jamf account. You do need to get that prepared, and you also have to select your server that you want it to manage. But what I showed you here for SSO, that's the same settings that you already have configured today. If you're doing anything extra, like having your end users authenticate using their single sign-on, so maybe they're using their single sign-on credentials to access self-service, for example, that's a different protocol, and you can turn that on as well.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right. All right, I think that's got everybody. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming.